Thank him for his song this morning. We've talked some about these gifts we have. And I don't think there's a soul on the planet that's been born that God's not given a gift or gifts to. Some have more than one. That's a blessing too. But with it comes responsibility, with comes opportunities, and sometimes we choose not to avail ourselves of those opportunities. You read through this book here, this is, if you just, and I know all of you have, but it's amazing when you really stop and you think about all of the history that God wanted us to have. He got it in that book right there. Some of them are a whole lot thinner, those small letter Bibles, but it's amazing that he has been able to put all of that in that book. Everything that we'll ever need. Anything else, we just deal with him through prayer. But it's just fascinating when I look through that book, and it goes, I mean, it's about God dealing with mankind, but it's more about being separated from mankind and for him desiring to have that relationship with him. And how he's gone about doing that is fascinating to me. We go back to the earliest part of history. You wonder why people did what they do, but more than that, why do we do what we do? It's the same thing today. It's not a whole lot of difference in a lot of places. But when you think about in Genesis that the thoughts of man were always evil, that's amazing. To the point that he destroyed everything and started over with those 8 souls. And when you start reading after his promise, and you start up to Abraham, and you start reading his final way that was his plan to bring people back to him permanently, it's amazing through Christ Jesus. But I tell you, if you ever want to just read a chapter that is so sad, you need to read Ezekiel 16. That is so sad about how he talks about the children of Israel and what glorious things he had for them. And he goes through from the time that they were born and thrown out into a field, he said. And he said, and I saw you as I passed by, and I went out there and got you. You still had your umbilical cord on, and I took care of you, washed you down. And then later, you became old enough for marriage, and I married you. And then, man, starting through the rest of that chapter, how they treated God, really sad. I'll tell you need to read it sometime if you will. I'll tell you, it's really sad how mankind has treated God. Sad. And then he loves us so much that he always gave us a way to get back to him. It's just, it's really fascinating. But it's a great letter that he's given to man. You know, you've seen, now I've never read the Harry Potter stuff, but I don't know, how many volumes are they? How many? 7. Are they thick books? Okay, and so, but something new was added. I'm assuming every book something is going in another direction, or is it that way? When you get to the end of one book, do you realize that there's fixing to be another one, or do you just wait till it comes and then it just builds on that one? But this one, it's all what we need right there, right in that book. No more volumes, it's right in that book. Fred had a class here last week. I don't know if he was trying to stir up trouble or not, but anyhow, the point he was trying to make, and he made it well. I'm not trying to recap Fred's thing, but the important thing is that when these kids sit down and ask you questions, need to be prepared to somehow give them some answer without, looking like an idiot, but also not trying to fool them. And if you don't know, you just don't know, and that's what you tell them. I'm not really sure about that. And it was about, was it Bo that you said, is that who it was? And the question Bo asked, is there aliens? Wasn't that what it was? And so when they asked you that, I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, is it a yes and no? I don't know. But I tell you, there's one scripture Alan quoted that I quote a lot. And it's in 2 Peter, the very first chapter. It says, as his divine knowledge has given us all things pertaining to life and godliness. So how's that an answer to that? The answer is they have nothing to do with my salvation, and I don't have to worry about them bringing another message to me than what God's already given me. And so to me, that's my conclusion to that is they'll bring nothing new with them as far as what God's expectations of me is. And we talked about that all of us being small pieces in a bigger design. Small, not carrying with it the meaning of insignificant, because we're all very significant in the mind of God, or we wouldn't have been created. I was thinking the other day, I was driving, and I got to thinking about our thoughts, and he knows them all. That's why, and it's really mind-boggling when you start thinking about that. He tries to characterize it like number of hairs on your head. Well, that's not just for me. That's for everybody. That's for 6 billion, 7 billion people. And he knows your thoughts of all of those people, of all the people of the world. And to have that kind of power and care for us before he ever created us is just amazing to me. But being a small piece in a bigger design, we ought to be proud of that. And we ought to take great pains in whatever gift he's given us to use it to glorify him and to help somebody along the way. He talks about it in 1 Corinthians 12. He talks about the different parts or the people in the church and the different gifts that each person was given. And then he says, and he placed them as he saw fit in the church. When he created one to be a Christian and they became a child of God, then he put you in the church the way that now I don't know what all that really means. And if anybody does, then, does that mean, well, I do think there's a scripture that talks about this, but I'm not going to talk about it today. But then he goes through the body and all the parts of the body and how they work together. I'm going to tell you something. Last Sunday afternoon, I was telling somebody, I was cutting grass, and I got up close to the house, and I backed up, and I felt that I got stung. I mean, I thought I knew what it was because it was a sting. As a matter of fact, I still got the little mark there. But I grabbed my hat and I was slapping at it, and I saw it fly off, and there was where the stinger had been pulled from his abdomen, and he still had it, and he flew off to die. But I'll tell you something. The pain that I got from that right there. Hey, I'm gonna tell you something. I told Becky and Billy the other night, I have never felt no pain like that. I thought I was having a kidney problem one night, kidney stone, and I was doubled over, and Tricia said, well, you want to go to the emergency room? I said, I ain't got no choice. And so we get down on 2nd Avenue and start to turn left to go up on the hill, and all of a sudden, boom, it's just gone. And so she wanted to know, well, do you want to go ahead and go? I said, no, I'm not interested in going up there now. If it's the pain, I mean, it's totally gone just that fast. This pain right here, it was parallel to it. I'm talking about just in this part of my hand. From about 5:15, 5:30 till after midnight, the pain that was in this thing right here, I'm telling you, it was excruciating now. I'm just telling you. I put ice on it, didn't help. Held it up in the air to let the blood, nothing helped, and I just had to deal with it. But like I tell Tricia, I'm tough, and I was able to, and she says, yeah, right. But anyhow, and she wasn't there. That was the other bad thing about it. But I'll tell you, all of my body came to the rescue, because I can tell you I couldn't think about much else than that pain right there in my hand. I'm telling you, you don't want it. If you don't want that to deal with it. I've been stung plenty of times by honeybees. When I was little and growing up, I'd get stung all the time going barefooted and stepping on a honeybee. So I've had those stings, and they are aggravating. They hurt for a little bit. But this right here, well, way different than that. But anyhow, we talk about these gifts, and he talks about them in 1 Corinthians 12, and he talks about the same Spirit gives those gifts. And obviously, the more ability he's given us, then obviously he's expecting a little more out of us than he would the guy that doesn't have but one gift. And some people have multiple gifts, and that's a blessing from God. But along with it becomes responsibility. And we've talked about all these things. One of the gifts that has been given to man is, and I talked about it a little bit last week, is leadership. And so we, in the church, sometimes we're guilty of pointing toward Fred and Alan and Stan. Well, those are our leaders. Well, not necessarily them, just them, you see. But one of the best examples in the scripture is David. And we look at that guy. What's the first thing you think about when you think of David? Just right off the top of your head, boom, somebody says King David. What do you think about?
A man after God's own heart.
Huh?
A man after God's own heart.
There's one. A fight. I guess I'm the only dummy in here, because you know the first thing I think about sometimes is Bathsheba. I think the worst thing about him. Those kind of things. But the items y'all said, it really is the things we ought to think about. There's enough time to be spent thinking about people's failures, and too often today, we want to dwell on people's failures also, rather than accomplishments or ever how God might be using them in the kingdom. But when we start looking at David, you know, the first time that he is mentioned is in 1 Samuel, the 16th chapter. We don't have anything about him before that. And it starts with him tending these sheep. I mean, we find out that's what he did for his father. And Saul has already messed up, and so God sends Samuel down there to anoint the next king that he wants in charge of Israel. And so he goes down there, and we all know the story. And he asked Jesse to bring his sons out there. And how many sons did Jesse bring out there? All but one. He had 7 not counting David. So he brings him out there. He brings them all out there, and God is telling him, no, it's not that one that impresses you, and no, it's not this one that impresses you. He said, because I'm looking at a different aspect, and it's exactly what Richard talked about. I'm looking at that guy that's after my own heart. You can't see that, he said, but I can. He's telling Samuel, you can't see that, but I can. And so here, does it take any leadership ability to take care of the sheep? Yeah, you can't, what I understand, you can't just carry them out to the pasture and sit down over here under a tree and go to sleep, because when you wake up, they're all over the place. So you have to take time to keep them all pretty much grouped up. They're a whole lot easier to look after. But anyhow, he's being, in this chapter, he's being anointed. Now, this is in studying through all of this for the past few months, there's two things that, and I may forget even what they are, but there's two things that I never paid that much attention to, and I wondered about it after the fact. But anyhow, he goes down there to anoint him, and it says in here, is this the last one you got? And he said, well, I got one more, but he's out here, my youngest is out here tending the sheep. And I think I might have jotted down something I wanted to mention. I probably didn't. But that word that he uses, this youngest, it could possibly, now this is some of the commentarians, and you can take them for what they're worth, but it means to, I thought I stuck that little piece of paper in here, but anyhow, it means runt, possibly runt. And the Hebrew word, can't even remember what it is either, but anyhow, in other words, well, really, he's insignificant. That was the bottom line of what Jesse was telling him, that really he's at this point insignificant. I don't know if it's because of his age, because he was obviously a fairly young man. But the spirit had left Saul, and an evil spirit had come into him. The Spirit of God now rested on David. But I want you to listen, now, down through this 16th chapter, all we know about him, he was a sheep keeper, and he was the youngest of Jesse. But when that evil spirit came into Saul, he was having trouble dealing with that when it would start manifesting itself in his life. He would be very nervous, just his body, he just wouldn't be calm at all, and he needed something to soothe it. And down in verse 16 of that chapter, it said the spirit had left him, and it began to torment him, and his servant said, you know what you need, Master? You need some calming music. And that's what it says. And Saul commanded his servants, well, find me someone who plays well and bring him to me. Now this next verse is, I never paid any attention to this, and I don't know, and if you can help me, no joke, I mean seriously, where'd this guy understand all this? Now listen, this is a kid we're talking about, not even significant enough to bring him when he said, bring your sons before me. It wasn't even that significant. David wasn't for him to do that. But yet, here's what this guy says about David. And one of the young men answered in verse 18 of chapter 16 of 1 Samuel. He said, I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. I don't know if some of them says harp, whatever that. But this next sentence, he is also a valiant man, a warrior, eloquent, handsome, and the Lord is with him. I mean, can you tell me where that came from? I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts. I'd just like to know how would he know about this? We don't know anything about it in preceding verses. And how did this guy come to that conclusion? I mean, how did he have that information where God put it in here for us? How did he, how did he know that? Now, don't wait till after class and come tell me. If you know, you need to tell me now. Yeah. All right, I couldn't. Somebody tell me what journal. Do what?
The servant saw Jesse's son. He saw him. He knew of it. He knew what he
All right. Does anybody else have a similar type version of that, of exactly what that verse says?
Mine's ESV, and it says, "Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse," like that, almost like he had experience with him, like I witnessed some of the things.
Okay. All right. I mean, to say something like that, I'm a warrior. This was, and of course, I guess maybe the King James, New King James, or whichever translation has it in a more concise way, the way that I guess that it was the translators originally put it down. I just didn't understand where this guy would have found this out, other than being knowing him and knowing about some of the things that we find out about later about David. This guy may have already done that, but be that as it may. But he was already known, and he was known as, I'm going to tell you the qualities that I see here. He was already known as a leader. He had a lot of the qualities of the leadership right here mentioned in this. So he started at an early time in life, obviously trying to do what the Lord wanted him to do. Who else did that sound like? Who?
Joseph.
Joseph was one, absolutely. Later, years later. Who?
Jesus did it at 12, being in the
That's what, right. Didn't you know that I needed to be about my Father's business? I mean, he did not do that in a hateful way. I think it's more like, now, Mom, you told me that I needed to be knowing all that I can about my Father, and that's why I was here. I think that's, if we said that today, it was something like that. But listen, so they go to get David, and he's doing pretty good. But listen, in the 17th chapter, it's talking about they are in this battle with the Philistines, and this Goliath keeps coming out. But down in verse verse 15, it says and starting in verse 13, Jesse's three oldest sons had followed Saul to the war: Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah the third, and David was the youngest. The three oldest had followed Saul, but David kept going back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock in Bethlehem. I mean, at an early age, this guy has already got double duty. So I mean, he's using the gifts that God gave him with music and with leadership. He's going to take care of those sheep, and he's coming up here to help the king get over that evil spirit in his life. Who? During this time, I've seen, and I might have mentioned it last week, the ones that I've seen was from 13 to 17. I mean, some of them, I mean, that's what they use, and it's probably maybe 16 to 17, somewhere I'm assuming in that range.
Another question, how many of us look for leadership qualities in boys that age today? Look for them and encourage them in their leadership qualities. This makes me think I need to be doing more of that.
You know, in the regular secular world, really when a kid tries to do that, this day and time, they're really made fun of by the other kids, unless it is a athletic type setting when coaches and other players will acknowledge some players for being leaders. And coaches expect these older kids to be leaders. And so how do they do that?
By making them captain.
By what?
By making them captain. Put the C on their jersey.
But how do they come to that conclusion? Because of what?
Because of their leadership, because of their being a coach on the court or on the field.
Okay, being a coach on the field, but by the actions that they have portrayed, they are considered leaders. And so people are looking to them. That's why coaches ask these leadership type guys and that understand the system already, hey, be first in line. But a real leader, you ain't got to tell him that because he understands that he's got people watching him and he wants to be the one to sort of show them how to do it. And so it ends up being that way with the leaders. And really, it don't matter what age you can do that. I'll tell you right now. And it should never stop a kid because of people making fun of him or others, all you just trying to be a big shot, because they failed to want to do it. They want to throw rocks at the one that does.
David here was being a leader. You're talking about spiritual leaders and that, but being able to take care of his daddy's flocks and then taking care of his brothers and taking care of the line, approaching the sheep, and those are everyday things that he took leadership in. Not just spiritual, where God helped him all through it, but I think Rose Hill does a really great job of recognizing leadership in our women and our boys, and I think that's a really good thing to do in all of life is to recognize children because they're going to get discouraged and they're going to follow whatever else.
Well, some of the things you just mentioned about him is fixing to be talked about right here. When he starts trying to qualify himself, but he comes and he brings that food. Not only is he a shepherd and he's trying to console Saul, the king, he's also been called on now to bring some provisions for his brothers who are in the battle here. But when he gets there, what does he see when he gets there?
Men of little faith.
Huh?
Men of little faith. Men that don't have faith in God.
Yeah. He got these grown people that claim they are something. One of them being his older brother, chiding him for even being there to start with. And that was another thing that is interesting. And I just remembered what it was, and before I pass it, I want to go right back to it. When he anointed him in chapter 16, so Samuel took the horn of oil in verse 13 and anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord took control or entered David from that day forward. Now, the thing that if you really in your mind knew somebody was fixing to be the next king, how would you treat that person? how do you think you'd treat him? Like a king already. I don't care how old he was, 14, 15, 17, it wouldn't really matter. But I really don't believe that his brothers realized the significance of what they were looking at. Now, you may differ with me, and that's okay too, because if you do, you're probably right, and I probably have misread it. But I'm telling you, some of the things that happened a short time after that would not lead me to believe that they thought they was talking to the next king of Israel. He comes to the battle lines, and he is appalled by what's being allowed here. He arrived and he asked his brothers how they were. Now this is in Psalms, 1 Psalm 17, up around verse 22. Find out how they were. And suddenly this guy, this champion of the Philistines, Goliath, he comes forward from the Philistine battle line and shouted his usual words, which David heard. And when all the Israelite men saw Goliath, they all retreated. And so David wants to know about, what happens to the person that gets this guy? Is there any special thing happened to him? And they told him. But when he's asking about those things, somebody goes and tells Saul that. Man, there's a little kid down here talking about defeating this guy. So they call for him. But in the meantime, in verse 28, David's oldest brother, Eliab, listened as he spoke to the men. He's listened to David. And he became angry with him. Why'd you even come down here? Why'd you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? He said, I know your arrogance and your evil heart. How does any of the earlier translations read right there?
Your pride and the insolence of your heart.
The what of your heart?
Insolence.
You see, I mean, that's very disparaging terms. If he knows he's going to be the next king and he's making those kind of comments, it leads me to believe they didn't really realize what was going on when David was anointed, but they may have. That,
To me, a lot like Joseph's brothers.
right, that's right. Man, you got the nerve to be characterizing us falling down before you. But anyhow, David, just like kids, well, what did I do? That's what he says. Well, what have I done? I'm just asking a question. I mean, that's what he says. Mine translation, verse 29. Anyhow, so they go tell Saul. And so David tells Saul now, don't be discouraged. Can you imagine this kid coming up there, all these grown men, big army fighters out there supposed to be going to battle with, and all of them are scared to death. And David, this kid, comes up and he tells him, hey, don't worry about this. He said, your servant will get him. I'll take care of him. You're just a kid. You're just a kid. This guy has been a warrior his whole life, talking about Goliath. And now David talks about what Mary was talking about just a minute ago. He said, look, your servant has been tending these sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down. Now, Fred, what's the comment you made the other night in that class about this? About these lions over there. They ain't there no more. David killed all of them. Anyhow, I didn't know that. I don't know if bears are still there or not, but they're not even in that land anymore either. I didn't know that. In other words, so he said in verse 36, I've killed lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be just like one of them. He has defied the armies of the living God, and the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion will rescue me from this Philistine. Now, this is a story we all know. Yes, ma'am.
Would we listen to a young man talking to us like that today?
No.
So maybe God sends him sometimes to talk to us.
Well,
He sent him to talk to Saul. I'm just trying to bring it down to.
Mary, I think we got young people, but they're having a trouble squeezing it out. And if they would just know this right here, what it says about, and the Spirit of the Lord was upon David. And do we not have this same Spirit living within us?
And all the things that you keep saying about them looking down on him and them not respecting that he could do these things, you know, you're just a shepherd, just makes me think of 1 Timothy 4:12. What Paul was telling Timothy, I think you could hear being said back then to David too, let no one despise you for your youth, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. Don't let them think just because you're young, you can't do great things.
That's a super scripture for this too. And it probably, more than likely, Timothy was a little older than David was at this time, but he still was recognized as a youth, a young person. But I think Mary is right. I think that there's probably a lot of young people today that knows what to do, but sometimes because of peer pressure, they just can't quite squeeze it out. And it's sad because sometimes when you're doing the right thing is exactly when you're going to get this. I mean, if we look back to Jesus, God Almighty in the flesh, and he's taken all this ridicule and at any moment could do something about it. But he's 30-something years old. We're talking about a kid now, you know, but there are kids, and I'm sure you may know some that decide, they're going to do what's right, and they may have to turn and go this way sometime when all the rest of them go this way.
Well, you know, ain't that about 70, 80 years ago, kids were to be seen and not heard. That's,
Yeah.
I'm not the only one ever.
And some of us still sort of look at them like that. You're to be seen and not heard. You're right.
Yeah, that's the point that I was gonna make is, yeah, sure, it's peer pressure, but it's also not peers. It's people, older people
Yeah.
that don't encourage them, or that say, well, they use smart pants trying to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. I think it's not always peers, it's sometimes young, and they need to be recognized for, following God, and especially if they're Christians.
Yeah. That is totally true.
You might have a good idea there.
Yeah.
They might be capable, but we think, now let me just do that because I'll do it better.
Yeah.
And they're very capable, but we just still think we need to talk to myself.
Yeah.
And my 16-year-old child better. Things that we think,
You know,
still my baby.
kids and us as we're growing up, we think that we may be the only one that feels like that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm still kind of stuck on verse, you read chapter 17, verse 28. His brother Eliab, what he said, I think I've always kind of read over it and said, oh, you know, they were making fun of him, they didn't believe him. But that is a pretty harsh thing that he said, I know your insolence.
Right.
And the wickedness of your heart. That's not saying, you know, you're irritating me, go back and help or whatever. He's saying he knows his heart and his motive, which of course he was lying and he was wrong. And I think instead of, obviously he's speaking out of whether it be jealousy or hate or whatever, but we know the whole story, having the Bible, seeing that David was a man after God's own heart, and you have a brother saying, you're wicked heart, which was a lie.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't saying that out of fruits, right? Because
We know that's
was-
not right.
No, because he was helping his dad, he was helping his brothers. So sometimes, you know, it's caused me to think and see what was really Eliab's fruits and what was he jealous of, and just being careful to see if you see a person who's trying to do the right thing. Don't say things about heart issues, because none of us know people's
That's
hearts
right.
except through obviously fruits. You
Well,
know?
what I see is he's embarrassed to death, and that's the only way he could express it. I'm telling you, I believe he was so embarrassed as he was the big brother. He's supposed to be one of the leaders in the family, and all of a sudden, he's turning away from the fight. And I think he's embarrassed. And I believe that's why he would say it, and it was just a bunch of baloney that he was saying, trying to cover his. But I used to tell my kids, I said, let me tell you something. When people in the group, might be 10 or 12 in a group, come up with an idea to do something, then there's a lot of them in that group that really don't want to do it, but they're afraid to be labeled as, oh, you don't like to have no fun. I said, I'm going to tell you today, if you will just turn and leave, I guarantee you most of them will be right behind you, because they don't want to do it either, but they're just a little afraid of doing it. And now, Joshua particularly, look at him. He'd been diving in the, what you call that thing? Down the road down there, the gravel pit. Ain't had no business in there, but he got one friend that goes with him, and they in there diving in that thing. And look at him, still jumps on them trains. And ain't got no business doing that, but I'm saying he's not influencing 30 more people to do it, because people want to go do it, want to go experience whatever that's like. But I've just told them, just don't think you're the only one in that group that don't want to do some of these things that are mischievous, like Clark did. And y'all talked to Clark about that. You talked to him about that mischievous as a, yes, ma'am.
And one thing too that I think is neat is, you know how when kids are little, they'll say exactly what they think, right? They have no filter. But sometimes I think as adults, we're so careful to not hurt someone's feelings, or we don't want to go against the status quo, that we hush them up and tell them to be quiet. But if you think about it, David was probably one of those kids who went and was like, okay, this is what we need to do. You know how we hush kids sometimes because you shouldn't say something like that in public. And I think maybe God's, wanting us to know that you just need to say the truth.
That's right.
But we're always, hushing them up. So I thought that was
That's great. Thank you all this morning for being here, and thank you for your comments. And we'll talk a little bit more about David next week, and then some other things. Thank you all again.